day, everyone. Welcome to the Innovation Alley podcast. This is your hosts, Chris Johnson, Dan Blair, Michael Legary here today. And it's big news this week. We talked about crowdfunding failures on past modules. We're going to revisit this topic again because finally the Zano Report has come out. And Zano, a little supposedly autonomous UAV where you could take selfies from afar or have have the drone follow you on a dirt bike, horse ride, whatever. It was the most funded campaign in Kickstarter in Europe, and it went bankrupt. And myself, I was one of the lucky folks to have his money swindled, about $600 worth of a drone that won't fly. And so this is something that's going to change the face of crowdfunding over the next year. This was a big story. It's one of many that have happened this year, but this one was one of the most serious because there was a lot of allegations of wrongdoing, criminal wrongdoing. And, so the guys, I know you had, from a report perspective, essentially this morning, it just came out. But, there's a couple key things in the report that I think are interesting to talk about from a founder perspective, from a startup perspective. And for anyone who wants to read the report, I'll put the link on the podcast site for SoundCloud and for YouTube. But ultimately, one of the very first challenges Zano had was the fact that they had some modest ideas of what the crowdfunding campaign was going to do, and they literally knocked it out of the park. So they're looking for about 125,000-ish, and they ended up with 3.5 million-ish. Yep. So it just knocked it out of the park.
Substantial funding.
CES loved them. Popular Science loved them. So before they even had a chance to deliver, they had this huge obligation on their heads. So knowing that and
that obligation made even stronger because they breached stretch goals on Kickstarter. So the original product that they said they were going to build, they got crushed, and they had to come out with, they had all these extra expectations, which were arguably, ridiculously lofty.
Well, that's just it. So now, of course, every startup can be exposed to that same concern. So, in hindsight, what kinds of things if you're a startup looking to build these Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaigns, what could you do to make sure you don't fall into the same pit?
Well, I think you have to know stuff's going to go wrong all the time, over and over.
Never,
and that's just the way that's right.
That's your startup.
But so you read their Kickstarter page, right? It's what you fell for in the fluffy stuff. There,
it is.
Poke.
It was the video. The video looked beautiful.
Yeah, well, right, which may or may not be doctored. But so when you read through their campaign, you see, hey, we've got this great product. We've got our supply chain 100% locked up. We've got our suppliers vetted and figured out. Come on, you're sourcing parts from 25 different places, probably at least. You have to know something's going to go wrong, and you got to have contingencies in place. And that's so easy to say because what are you going to do? Order a minimum order quantity of propellers from 3 different suppliers? Not likely. But at the very least, you can pad your timeline such that you can accommodate disasters that are going to come.
Yeah, so I think that it all comes in when you're thinking about starting a startup with a physical product. A lot of people are in the mindset of we got to get it as flashy as possible.
Yeah.
I think what this really shows is that you need to be a little bit more transparent when asking for people's money, whether they are remorseful or whatever. Through the report, you might see that maybe there is some validation to this to the claims of criminal issues, but giving them the error, the side of doubt here, where maybe they had the best intentions and things just went wrong. Being a little bit more transparent, showing, by having the really doctored up videos and stuff, sure, it shows, the legitimacy of your product. However, it can give people the wrong vision of what you're actually delivering right now.
Yeah, well, that lack of good expectation setting, I think that's the struggle many startups have on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and you name it. Because people are so quickly they're expecting a finished product, and with the Zano, I fell into that game where it was we're not talking about a $60 gimmick here. We're looking at an investment in a device, and the credibility seemed to be there. High quality video, Google search in the background. You got backing by these different articles and publicists, and that supposed evidence that they have some functioning back end technology. So the interesting things around the story, just talking about the criminal aspects, it just, from the report, he doesn't spell that out in any particular way, but a very strong suggestion is the fundamental technologies hadn't worked. Once the money came in, they started spending. And instead of setting expectation that, oh, geez, like these stretch goals have totally changed what our prototyping might look like, we're going to need another year. They just said, yeah, everything's life is great. We're ordering boards. We're ordering boards. We're ordering boards. Oh, we're ordering boards again, apparently. We're having to reorder propellers because they're broken or too big, too heavy, etc. So how about resetting those expectations? From a pressure perspective, everyone on the outside wants to hear about the successful startup, that you have this widget no one else could think of, and in an inhuman amount of time, that you've been able to build something no one else could. Since we're talking about drones, really it looked like the Zano was better than like a Phantom 3, which is, hundreds of millions of dollars have been dropped into that, and there's hundreds of employees working on it. But that expectation to deliver immediately, how do you manage that? How do you organize your pitch and set expectations with your team with those kind of constraints out there in the real world?
I think it all comes back into like realistic goal setting and stuff. When you realize that, like, okay, I need $125,000 and this is what we're going to deliver. Be realistic in your stretch goals and be realistic in what you're actually trying to do, because you can only accomplish so much, whether you're a superhuman startup or that overnight success or whatever. We're all 5-year overnight successes. There is time that goes into things, and especially because when they showed the campaign, they pretty much promised, like, this is working, this is done.
Yeah.
It wasn't done, and it didn't work. And, it really comes back to bite you in the ass later.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they, again, going back to the supply chain focus, they sort of, the Zano guys, they knew that they had supply locked up and that's fine. But I think what happened was they went out to find demand. I think that they could have told a truthful story, or maybe a more accurate story to their current state. They might have only driven an eighth or a tenth of the demand, but if they could have delivered on that initial promise, then they'd still be around, they'd still have employees, and they in their next incarnation might hit the dreams of every boy and girl who wants a micro quadcopter Zano.
I know I want one.
Right, well, so do I. Maybe we'll share mics when he gets it.
I think so.
Well, there's some interesting points there. I find one interesting thing is that there was a competitive British organization that was building 3D copters. They went to CES. They had set expectations quite low, but they've actually been able to execute. They couldn't do self-avoidance. They couldn't do this. They couldn't do that. And I guess they were getting a lot of stress from Zanos and others in the market until this has happened. And now look, the people who set their expectations low and delivered, they're going to be around
succeeding.
to go ahead.
I think it puts a lot into perspective that, like, crowdfunding is a relatively new thing. Kickstarter's only been around for so long, and I mean, I guess it existed before, but now people can raise a lot of money before they've actually started development. And I think that it really needs to this really helps put it into perspective that, when you go on Kickstarter and you look at products, it's not a store. You're not shopping for products. You're literally investing without any return other than you might get a product one day, investing in someone's idea. And, I think we put a little bit too much hype into a few nice pictures and a video without any actual proof of anything working.
Well, I think that is one of the fundamental changes. I think now consumers will have made the switch, because I can tell you when I go on Kickstarter, I look at those videos saying, wow, that is something I can buy. It mentally, you got to take the second.
But you have a crooked eye when you look at them, because you're like, I wonder how doctored this is.
Well, that's it. You got to take that second and say, wait a minute, this isn't Mass Drop or eBay or whatever. Yeah. This is a company pitching pre-build. And then exactly, you start all that dissection process. But when you hop on the site, the look, the feel, the approach, it
feels like a store.
It feels like a store.
I have my hand up for the listeners.
Yes, sir.
Because I have an idea.
What?
Why isn't there an authenticating body or group or certification for my Kickstarter?
Patent pending, man. I was going to do that.
No, not just patent pending, but but no, seriously. So I build this thing.
Absolutely.
Why can't I somewhere go to a Kickstarter authenticated, almost like what do you call that when you got to go sign somewhere, or your lawyer or whatever, whatever.
It's going to be a form of a trust broker. Like it's essentially,
trust broker.
is it an audited, validated
someone
project?
that can prove that you are this.
Yeah,
far
so I'm going to
along.
go to a lawyer and they're going to sign off and say, yes, the thing in that video did almost that. I mean, they could have flown it down one hallway, like the guy says in the article. I flowed down one hallway and it hit the wall because there's no obstacle avoidance, not even a semblance, not crappy.
Yeah.
There was none.
Yeah.
So I think it wouldn't be very hard even for a layman to do that. So there's an idea for us.
Well, I think from a crowdfunding perspective, people are going to expect that. I think we're going to see more people looking at those videos and really questioning whether or not it can, the thing exists, and clicking the report to at least see some evidence. But I think the other interesting aspect just about that expectation setting in general is that culture of, as you fund more, you're going to get more, I think gets a lot of startups in trouble.
What's that saying where it's like, if it's too good to be true, it probably is?
Yeah.
That one? Yeah.
There it is.
Like
obstacle
common
avoidance,
sense.
cool. Like all the stuff that this thing did, all cool. When you put it all together, it's like, huh.
Well, you're talking a
feels too good to be true.
multi-million-dollar project. I
Right.
find, so I picked on you there. You're saying your things fail. So the listeners don't realize that, we pull this stuff on each other daily. So from a humility perspective, a number of my hardware projects have fallen off the deep end because we started with something that seemed very simple.
Yeah.
And by the end of me being involved with technical design, we had 36 functions, 3 million lines of code, and 3 years later, we still haven't got a working prototype. And it's been funny where that mentality of fail fast, fail cheap, it can leave you mentally so quickly, where it
looks good on a poster.
We hear it every day. Yet once you have that money in hand, you feel like you're successful before you've delivered.
But
right?
then
That's
there's the other side of it. So I agree that can happen. It's tempting, and it's like an abyss, is what you call that. The other side is where, with one of our early AV projects, we built this app and it really worked great. You could control multiple AV environments with the app. It worked great, but so you could make it work once. I could build one Zano that works great and it has all the features I promised.
Yeah.
However, when I want to scale that thing and make it work in N number of locations on X number of hardware pieces, turns out that's actually borderline impossible unless you want to invest human time into writing custom drivers. Things that you don't know when you first set out, and sometimes those assumptions, even though you've built the thing and it actually works, when you look back and you go, oh yeah, well, how are we supposed to see that coming? Right? Maybe we could have, but like sometimes it's intentions aside. Here, I think it's a story. It's really a collision of intentions might have been good, but just lack of planning, lack of anticipating trouble spots. I think there's a bunch of factors that went into. Plus, they grossly overdrove their Kickstarter, and they had supply chain partners who had invested heavily into very specialized automation to help them produce. So you don't want to be these guys right now.
Well, I think it is a traditional failure. I think as I read the report, like it's about a 15-minute read. It was that standard tale of startup success and failure within a year. But as we wrap up, what is the ask? Like from a startup founder perspective, what would you like to see change in the culture of crowdfunding from this?
I think that it's important for people to realize that, and I believe it's actually in their terms and conditions, when you are looking at a Kickstarter campaign, they actually have to have a prototype.
Yeah.
They can't have an idea.
Concept.
They have to have a real prototype. And that's why in the video they have to show their prototype. It can't be a drawing of a prototype. So when you're funding someone's idea, they likely can't deliver. If they can't get to the Kickstarter phase and have even just like a small prototype, it's probably not a good sign. So I think that it's important that when people are shopping around on Kickstarter, they realize, one, that it's not a store, and two, that they're backing an idea that should at that point have some sort of
should exist
prototype. It should exist in this realm.
Yeah.
Consider me advocating for a trust broker out there that I can go to, and I want to see a Kickstarter certified or Kickstarter partner certified check on Kickstarters and Indiegogos and that I want to fund. I want to see that. And
I want to know that they have something.
Well, it's convenient too. How it used to be staff picks on Kickstarter, and now it's projects we love, or
But still,
They changed
I
the
guarantee
culture.
they all love Xano.
Yeah, they did.
Right?
They loved them.
they love the ones that are getting the most media attention, not necessarily the ones that they've seen the real products.
Yeah,
of.
validated, right?
Yeah, but this is the problem. This is like back in the Mad Men days of like that's what Kickstarters really are. There's no regulation. They're like, you're watching these claims on TV about how it's like tobacco will make you run faster, right? Like in the 1920s or whatever. That's what Kickstarters, from a credibility perspective, that's what we're
that's very
seeing.
true.
And we're swallowing it and we're smoking it up and loving it, and it's gonna right like it's not good for you. And we, so I think that's what I'm taking away from this story.
Well, thank you very much. We're out of time. But again, like for the listeners at home, we're going to have the link up. It's worth a read. Check it out. And we'll be back with our next module in a few minutes.